character of Batman is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, comic book character of all time next to Superman. With this, we have gotten tons of interpretations over the years in the form of film. Here, I wanted to document all of the film serials, films, and canceled projects that have been attributed to the Caped Crusader. Due to the fact that TV shows have a lot of storylines and too much to cover, I won't be talking about those and just sticking to theatrically released films. So, here we go, the history of Batman in film. First things first, we have Roland West's The Bat Whispers from 1930, which was a remake to his previous film, The Bat. This film apparently gave Bob Kane the initial idea for Batman. However, he had a rough outline of the character until Bill Finger came in and pretty much gave us the mythos, rogue gallery characters, and look of the character that we've come to know and love. I recommend the Hulu documentary Batman and Bill to know more about how Kane fucked over Bill Finger, but moving on. Batman was introduced in Detective Comics number 27 in May of 1939. 4 short years later, we got our first adaptation of the character in a 15-part serial simply titled Batman. Batman here is played by Lewis Wilson, and his companion Robin is played by Douglas Croft. The villain here is one purely made for the film called Dr. Daka, played by J. Carroll Naish. Due to the fact that the villain is Japanese and that this was made during World War II, it has a very anti-Japanese vibe, which makes it pretty dated and a little uncomfortable to watch, but still a decent serial nonetheless. Next, we have its sequel in 1949, Batman and Robin, which I can safely say is a lot better than the other Batman and Robin, but we'll get to that in a minute. This time, Robert Lowry is playing Batman and Johnny Duncan is playing Robin. There is another made-for-film serial villain, the Wizard, played by Leonard Penn. It's another decent serial, but nothing groundbreaking that makes the character new or innovative. Next is a big one. Batman the movie, which introduced the world to one of the more famous Batmen, the late great Adam West, along with Burt Ward as Robin. For our villains, we have Cesar Romero as the Joker, Lee Merriweather as Catwoman, Frank Gorshin as the Riddler, and Burgess Meredith as the Penguin. Simple stuff and a ton of fun to watch. This obviously led to the very popular television series that ran for 3 seasons. In 1969, ABC pulled the plug on Batman due to low ratings. In the late 1970s, CBS wanted to do a TV movie, I shit you not, called Batman in Outer Space, but it got no further than a ludicrous idea that execs thought could bring back Batman in some capacity. In 1979, there was another plan to bring Batman back called Return of the Batman, which would have returned Batman to his dark roots, which was going on in the comics at the time, as comics were currently in their Bronze Age, a return to darker stories. Michael Uslan and Benjamin Melniker, I hope I'm pronouncing those names right, bought the rights to Batman in the hopes of making that dark film. They wanted Richard Maibaum to write and Guy Hamilton to direct, but both turned it down. Uslan kept trying to pitch the film, but nothing ever came of it. He eventually sat down and wrote the script and tried to pitch it to various studios, but nobody wanted it. Producers John Peters, who has a colorful history with another certain comic book character, and Peter Guber were eventually interested, and they tried to get the film made to pattern the pre-production off of Superman the movie. However, Polygram Pictures absorbed Guber's company, and they decided to leave and take the Batman rights with them. They eventually set up shop at Warner Brothers, who were interested in the Batman character. In 1983, Tom Mankiewicz completed a script simply titled The Batman. It was to feature the Joker and Rupert Thorne as villains and feature Silver St. Cloud as his love interest. Mankiewicz was taking inspirations from the limited series Batman Strange Apparitions. The Batman was announced in 1983 for a 1985 release date. Mankiewicz wanted an unknown for Batman, William Holden as Commissioner Gordon, David Niven as Alfred, and Peter O'Toole as the Penguin. There were also reports of either Mankiewicz or someone else wanting David Bowie as the Joker. Ivan Reitman and Joe Dante were considered for directors, and Reitman wanted Bill Murray as Batman, and Joe Dante today wanted John Lithgow as the Joker. Eddie Murphy and Michael J. Fox were candidates for Robin. There were 9 different rewrites on the script from all different screenwriters. Adding on to the fact that Holden and Niven were both dead at this point and no one could agree on a vision, the project was eventually scrapped. Now we have the cultural phenomenon of Tim Burton's Batman from 1989. Michael Keaton was eventually chosen as Batman, with much chagrin from fans, and Jack Nicholson as the Joker. There was a plan to put in Robin, played by Marlon Wayans of all people, but he was eventually scrapped. Batman 89 is beloved by many fans and hated by many naysayers, but this was definitely the Batman that sparked the dark, brooding version that many comic fans came to love and a general audience was surprised by due to Adam West being the reigning Batman for over 20 years. Burton apparently didn't want to do a sequel, but in order to get him back for the sequel, they gave him free range and do whatever he saw fit. So because of this, there were no traces of a sequel in sight, and we got more of a Tim Burton film than a Batman film. Keaton returned as Batman, and our rogue gallery is Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman and Danny DeVito as the Penguin. Once again, Burton did try to put Robin in the film, but once again, he was cut. There was also another plan to put Two-Face in the film, played by Billy D. Williams, as he portrayed Harvey Dent in the first film. However, due to there being a lot of villains, he was cut and replaced with Christopher Walken's character Max Schreck. In fact, at the end of the film, Schreck dies, and that was supposed to be the accident that birthed Two-Face. However, due to the overly dark vision, Burton was booted in favor of Lost Boys director Joel Schumacher. However, before that, there was another film planned and a different film released in between returns and forever. Tim Burton's Batman 3. Not much is known about it, but before Burton got booted, was that Keaton would have returned and Marlon Wayans would have officially been cast as Robin in this film. For a villain, it would have been the Riddler, played by Robin Williams. He initially refused due to WB using him as bait to get Nicholson to sign on for the Joker role for Batman 89. While they did eventually apologize, he still didn't like where the project was going. After Burton was booted, Keaton read the script for Joel Schumacher's Vision, simply said it sucked, and left the production. Wayans even bought his way not to appear in the film. It was because of this that both of them were replaced with Val Kilmer and Chris O'Donnell, respectively. According to many sources, Schumacher stated that he did want to do a more serious Batman film, with being about the psychology and analysis of the Batman character. But according to Michael Keaton, Schumacher asked, "Why does everything have to be so dark all the time?" I tend to believe the former, because there are darker moments in the film we got, despite a lot of it being cut. WB wanted something more mainstream and kid-friendly, so that's what Schumacher did, just so they would sell toys. See, WB were always assholes, even before Snyder came along, but we'll get to that later. However, before Keaton left, he did offer an idea of a prequel film, but Schumacher was against it. Rene Russo was originally set to be Dr. Chase Meridian, but after Keaton left, she was booted in favor of Nicole Kidman, who would fit Kilmer's age at the time. Before we get to Batman Forever, though, we have the only animated theatrically released Batman film, until this year that is, Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Kevin Conroy returns to his role from the series as Batman, as well as Mark Hamill as the Joker, and plenty of other new characters. Despite being a box office bomb, it has become a cult hit many years later, and has won the hearts of many fans of the animated series and of the Batman character. Now, going back to live action. What was eventually made instead of Tim Burton's third Batman film is Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever. Val Kilmer is a decent Batman, and Chris O'Donnell is a decent Robin. The Rogue Gallery involves an overly silly Joker, played by Jim Carrey, and a zany Two-Face, played by Tommy Lee Jones, who replaced Billy D. Williams. Both do an okay job. As I stated, there are hints of a great film in here somewhere, as Schumacher did want to do something more serious with his own flair. WB forced him to make a more child-friendly film, and we got what we got. It was a box office hit despite mixed reviews from critics, and Schumacher was brought on for the next film. The very, very infamous Batman film. Oh joy. So, Batman Forever made money. That means they fast tracked a sequel. And we got Batman and Robin. Due to scheduling conflicts and all around being hard to work with, Val Kilmer exited the role and George Clooney stepped in. The reason for this is hysterical. Schumacher was sitting in a cafe or restaurant or somewhere reading a newspaper, and there was an ad for From Dusk Till Dawn, and he drew the cowl on Clooney's face, and this is how he wanted his Batman. Very dumb. I will still defend Joel Schumacher with Batman Forever and a lot of other decisions with WB forcing him to do what they wanted to do. But, dude, come on. Anyway, Chris O'Donnell returns as Dick Grayson, and Alicia Silverstone plays Barbara Wilson. Since Pat Hingle didn't have a huge role in these movies as Commissioner Gordon, they decided for Barbara to be Alfred's niece rather than Gordon's adopted daughter. She, of course, becomes Batgirl, a very terrible Batgirl. The villains this time around are Poison Ivy, played by Uma Thurman, Mr. Freeze, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Robert Swenson as Bane. However, here, Bane is just a glorified henchman rather than the menacing villain that everyone knows and loves. People would have to wait 15 years for that. Surprise, surprise, since the film was more focused on selling toys than, making a good movie, it was named one of the worst films of all time and one of the worst comic films of all time. And it's because of this that Batman was put on arrest for the next 8 years. But that doesn't mean we got a shit ton of canceled projects with that. Despite what happened with Batman and Robin, WB were actually impressed with the dailies and fast-tracked another sequel for a 1999 release, Batman Unchained. That's right, Batman Unchained. For some strange reason, everyone keeps calling this canceled project Batman Triumphant, even though the film was never called that from pre-production to cancellation. Someone must have pulled the name out of their ass, and for some reason, everyone kept calling it that. So shut up and call it the real name instead. Batman Unchained, damn it. It's actually a better title anyway, so whatever. It was apparently supposed to be a return to the darker, more Burton tone of Batman, like Schumacher always wanted to do. George Clooney, Chris O'Donnell, and Alicia Silverstone were all set to return, and this film would have given us the introduction to some more B to C list villains. It was set to have Scarecrow, Harley Quinn, Man-Bat, and the Mad Hatter. All of his previous villains would have returned, like Two-Faced Riddler, Catwoman, and Penguin, and the Joker, in a hallucinogenic sequence thanks to the fear toxin from Scarecrow. Harley Quinn was also set to be a toy maker and the daughter of the Joker, out for revenge against Batman. Nicolas Cage and Jeff Goldblum were considered for Scarecrow, and Courtney Love and Madonna for Harley Quinn. However, in a user called CinemaGeek's video on canceled DC projects, a link will be in the description, he stated that Mad Hatter and Man-Bat were also set to be in the film, played by Martin Short and Mark Lynn-Baker, respectively. However, I haven't found any info regarding to the presence of Man-Bat or Mad Hatter in Batman Unchained, so I'm not sure if that information is correct or not. Of course, though, due to the poor reception of Batman and Robin, Clooney not wanting to be Batman ever again, and Schumacher's passion for these projects being lost, they pulled the plug on the whole thing. From this point until Batman Begins was greenlit, Schumacher was open to the possibility of directing another Batman film, Batman Year One. He felt like he owed it to the fans to make a tonally correct Batman film. Apparently, he wanted Kurt Russell as Commissioner Gordon. Not much else is known about this project, though. There was also mention of creating an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns in 1999, but again, nothing ever came of it and not much is known about it. And I'm not even sure if this was a real project or not, but might as well mention it just in case. The next big planned project for Batman was Batman Dark Knight, spelled as one word. This was another proposed sequel to Batman and Robin, with Schumacher directing. Once again, it was set to be darker in tone to the previous films and be more of a character study of the Batman character. Clooney and O'Donnell were in mind to return once again. It would have featured Scarecrow and Man-Bat, similar to Unchained, just shaving down some characters. Once again, Goldblum and Cage were in mind to play Scarecrow, as well as Christopher Lloyd. Terrence Stamp was also considered to play Man-Bat. It would have seen Batman retiring from the cape and cowl, feeling like he lost the mystique and enemy's fear. Very meta. And Grayson going back to school at Gotham U. Jonathan Crane would have been a professor at Gotham U, as well as a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, testing inmates' fears. It's because of Crane that Langstrom becomes Man-Bat. It's because of him that Batman is framed for the murders, very similar to the animated series episode On Leather Wings, and he must come out of retirement to face the creature as well as Scarecrow, who is keeping Robin in Arkham Asylum for some reason. Langstrom is also dealing with sort of a Jekyll and Hyde scenario and trying not to transform into the fearsome villain. To be honest, despite the stupid title, this could have been a great addition to the Batman franchise, but it was shelved in favor of other projects. Chris O'Donnell also stated in an interview in 2012 that there was a proposed Robin spin-off, but nothing ever came of it. One of those other projects was Batman Beyond, to be directed by Boaz Yakin and written by Paul Dini, Alan Burnett, and Neil Stevenson, creators of the Batman Beyond TV show. A first draft of the script was made, but Yakin realized his heart wasn't in it and walked away. WB immediately pulled the plug in favor of the next project. Apparently, Beyond would have been very similar to the TV show and have a very Blade Runner vibe to it. It would have showed Terry McGinnis and his rise to becoming the next Batman under the mentorship of Bruce Wayne. Ace the Bat Hound also would have been prominent for some reason. So Beyond was canned in favor of Darren Aronofsky's Batman Year One, despite Schumacher being interested in the project first. Aronofsky worked with comic creator Frank Miller to create a script based on the comic. However, there were many differences from the comic. Focusing more on Batman than Gordon, Alfred being omitted in favor of a mechanic named Little Al, the Batcave being in a subway station, Bruce being poor after his parents get killed, and much more weirder shit. A lot of concept art was made for the film, and it looked pretty interesting, actually. Aronofsky stated that it would have been very similar to Taxi Driver. Christian Bale was ironically considered for the lead role, as well as Aronofsky joking that they considered Clint Eastwood as well. Pretty much this entire project would have been one giant fuck you to the Batman mythos. Whether that would have been a good thing or a bad thing, we would never find out. It was eventually canned for yet another project, being different from the comic and being incredibly violent. So violent that it even surprised Frank Miller with how dark and violent it was. This is coming from the man who wrote Dark Knight Returns. Think about that. Next project that was considered to reboot Batman was Batman vs. Superman. Once again, Bale was considered for Batman, but he turned it down. Jude Law was the main actor considered for Superman, but after wearing the outfit, he also turned it down. Then Josh Hartnett became the favorite. Johnny Depp, Colin Farrell, James Franco, and Paul Walker were also considered for both parts. There was a draft made for the film, and if you want to know specifics, watch Mr. Sunday Movie's video on it. He goes through the entire thing and plot specifics. Link is in the description. Wolfgang Peterson was set to direct, and Akiva Goldsman penned the script. This film was eventually shelved in favor of J.J. Abrams' Superman film, Superman Flyby, which later morphed into Superman Returns. Now, the next project was actually something that got fucking released. Batman Begins with Christopher Nolan as the director and Bale as our Batman. It's a decent flick that reboots the franchise well and a great departure from Batman and Robin. It did keep some ideas from previous projects, like having it be an elongated origin story similar to Year One, as well as using Scarecrow as a villain like with Unchained and Dark Knight, but played by Cillian Murphy. However, he was pushed to the side in favor of Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul. If you want a great villain performance from Murphy, however, watch Wes Craven's Red Eye. It is actually surprisingly great. It was a good film and was probably necessary to get the Batman franchise back where it should be, dark and gritty. I personally don't like it all that much, but it was still what needed to happen to the Batman character. Of course, a sequel was commissioned, but we'll get to that next. First, we'll get into a film that went into pre-production that was supposed to be released in 2009, George Miller's Justice League Mortal. This time, Armie Hammer was supposed to be the Caped Crusader, and this film was supposed to feature heroes that were somewhat veterans in this world. He would have played a more quote-unquote deranged version of the Caped Crusader, with more so embracing the loner attitude of the Batman character, with him slowly developing as the film progresses. He had a lot in common with Ben Affleck's version of the grizzled veteran Batman, despite Hammer being 21 at the time. Out of all the Batman films I've spoken of here, this is the one that got the closest to being made, despite not being a Batman film. It would have actually been from the Flash's perspective, played by Adam Brody. Batman, along with the rest of the League, were supposed to be fighting Maxwell Lord. The reason this got cancelled was because of the worst timing in the world. It went into pre-production at the same time the writer's strike was happening and was forced to move production to Australia, as well as the fact that WB didn't want two Batman on screen. They pulled the plug to focus fully on Dark Knight. If you want more info on plot details, there is a great video by the user named Cut Short. Link will be in the description. Now it's time for Dark Knight. Bale returns as Batman, and now Heath Ledger will play our main villain, the Joker, and Aaron Eckhart eventually playing Two-Face. A great performance and a scary one from Ledger, and I do wish Two-Face had a bigger role. Not a lot of behind-the-scenes action except for one. I do know that Crispin Glover was considered for the Joker. There were also rumors that the original script for the sequel to this had Two-Face coming back along with the Joker later in the film, but Nolan put these rumors to rest. Moving on to the gap in between 2008 and 2012, a lot of people thought that the Riddler and Catwoman would be the villains, and they would be played by Johnny Depp and Angelina Jolie. However, Nolan stated that Bane would be the villain instead, and that inspiration for the film would be from Nightfall, No Man's Land, and The Dark Knight Returns. However, people were half right about Catwoman being in the film, but she is played by Anne Hathaway instead. This film got lukewarm reception mainly due to the fact that it goes back to the plot of the first film and piggybacked on that rather than making a more focused story. However, it is still a very good film that ended Bale and Nolan's reign on Batman on a decent note. 4 years later, we eventually got Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. Here, Batman is played by Ben Affleck. Initially, he got a lot of hate for the role, but once the film came out, everyone said that everything sucked about the film, except him. So, take that, bitches. He's less seen as a protagonist in this film and more seen as a secondary antagonist to Superman, alongside Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, who I actually did not hate. He did a fairly good job in the role. However, after a long fight and some questionable scenes, Batman fights alongside Superman and Wonder Woman to defeat Doomsday in a great addition to the Batman franchise. Even though I am in the minority on that, but I don't give a flying fuck. The next Batman film we have on our list is an animated film, the first theatrically released animated Batman film in 24 years. It is a spin-off of the Lego Movie focusing on Batman voiced by Will Arnett. It also includes Michael Cera as Robin, Rosario Dawson as Barbara Gordon, Ray Fiennes as Alfred, and Zach Galifianakis as the Joker, and Jenny Slate as Harley Quinn, as well as a slew of other Batman villains. Even the Condiment King shows up, as well as Voldemort, Sauron, King Kong, and Daleks. Yeah, it's a weird movie, but a fun one that entertains both kids and adults. I know I enjoyed it. Even the Justice League makes an appearance in the film, which was nice to see. While once again not a Batman film, he is in it, and it deserves to be mentioned. Justice League, which just came out a few weeks ago. Lots of behind-the-scenes crap with the reshoots, changing of directors, cutting shit out, and a whole mess of crap that resulted in a conventional and generic film, unfortunately. However, despite this, Ben Affleck delivered a great performance as Batman, which is all we really needed. I mean, come on. So, now what? What is next for the Caped Crusader, the Dark Knight, the Batman himself? Well, that's exactly it. The Batman, or as it is rumored to be called. A solo Batman film is, in fact, in Ben Affleck's future. Or maybe not. This film hasn't even been made, nor has it been cancelled yet, and it already has a rich history of behind the scenes crap. Let's go back to the beginning, shall we? After viewing a 4-hour rough cut of Batman vs Superman, the WB execs gave it a standing ovation and gave Ben Affleck's Batman a 3-picture solo deal. So Affleck was signed on to direct, co-write, co-produce, and star in The Batman. There were also a lot of rumors that Affleck had quit and he wasn't working on the project, but stated during a Jimmy Kimmel interview that he was. Then he left the director's chair, ironically. My theory for him leaving is that after his gangster film Live by Night was released and received bad reviews, he doubted his directing capabilities and decided to leave the project. He would stay on as producer and star, though. Matt Reeves, director of Cloverfield and the latter two reboot Planet of the Apes films, became the director. It was then he promptly threw out Ben Affleck's script and started fresh. Details have been released that the villain would have been Deathstroke, played by Joe Manganiello, and it would have been very similar to David Fincher's The Game. Manganiello is still Deathstroke, though, as he did appear in the post-credit scene of Justice League, hinting at an Injustice League / Legion of Doom villain for the sequel, if that actually happens. It is unclear what Matt Reeves' script will be about. However, now Ben Affleck has doubts of being Batman himself. It's again unclear why he wants to leave the role, but there is a rumor going around that Reeves wants to replace him with Jake Gyllenhaal, which I personally can't see. I see him more as a villain than a hero. The reports are very conflicting. Some say he's going to leave the role, some say he's left the role already, some say that Matt Reeves wants to boot him, some say that he's staying on the role, and some say John Hamm is going to replace him. It's all very confusing, and I pretty much won't believe anything until Reeves or Affleck or WB says something. Well, that was my Batman in film history, including all the info I could get my hands on regarding cancellations and whatnot. Don't worry, this won't be the last history of, though, as I do plan on doing something very super in the future. So, watch out for that.